to West Tigers podcast. It's episode number 331. Wednesday night on the bye week. Steve Stretton, we haven't taken the week off like the players. We're not in Fiji like Benji. We're not in the UK. We're in our bunkers and we're getting down to work. Should we have had the week off, or are you happy to be here?
Happy to be here, mate. And it's not just Benji and Fiji. It's Declan, Joel, and Gary. They've all taken off. They've gone to sunnier shores. So I don't know where they are. But
Joel's usually
are here, mate.
Joel usually goes on about 4 or 5 cruises a year, so I assume he's on one of them somewhere in the Pacific or somewhere in the world. And Gary, he just came up with a late note about 1 minute ago, so he's going to be in trouble, I think. He's a late withdrawal.
Said he was in bed. We're recording this at 6:30.
Steve, before we're going to do a bit of because there's not much, obviously no game to preview this week, we're going to do our mid-season awards, and we're going to give some markings for key players for this year out of 10. I've asked Steve to come up with a word for each of these players' season. Buller, Olam, Staines, Galvin, Sullivan, Caesar, Appy, Steph, Bateman, and the coach, Benji Marshall. A word and a marking out of 10, and at the end we'll give our awards for best player so far this season, most improved player, biggest surprise, biggest disappointment, and stuck in the mud was our 5th word. You can interpret that however you wish. But firstly, Steve, just a little bit of news this week. Obviously no real surprise, a little bit of criticism from the usual suspects at News Limited about Shane Richardson being on the UK and Benji Marshall being in Fiji whilst the club is on an 8-game losing streak. When I speak about the usual suspects, I think you know who I mean. Do you have an issue with either of them being overseas during the bye week?
On the face of it, no, not really. I don't think there's anything wrong with freshening up. If you're giving the playing group a few days off, which they are, and I'd imagine a lot of clubs, in fact, if not all clubs would do that, then I suppose it doesn't really matter if you spend those few days at home or if you jump on a plane and nick off for a couple of days. I have absolutely no concern with Richardson. Like, he's over there working. From what we understand, he's doing his job. I can't understand how anyone could throw him in the same conversation as Benji, but it's just a matter of trying to stick another knife in, I suppose. Yeah, and Rothfield's just got it in for Richardson, so he's got no credibility whatsoever. But with Benji, I said, mate, on the face of it, and I don't have a problem with it, but considering what happened earlier in the season when he came out and talked about the work-life balance, which, again, I don't have a problem with, but it did create headlines, and we're not performing. And he did say in his press conference that he lays a lot of blame at his own feet. He's going to go away in this time off and work it all out. Then to be heading off with his family to Fiji is probably not a good look. And I just wonder whether he needs to read the room a little bit better. And sometimes you've got to make sacrifices, not because it's necessarily the right thing to do, but it's perceived as the right thing to do. And sometimes you just got to miss out a little bit because what you're doing is going to be seen as wrong. And I'd put this probably in that category.
I'm glad you mentioned that point, Steve, because that was the thing that just, I thought that press conference, he made it out like he was going to be sitting at the desk for a week with the videotape out, which I know sounds very 1980s stuff. But he said, look, I've got to work out why we're not managing games. I put a lot of it at my feet. And I know last year he's consistent. Last year he was in Fiji on the same mid-season break, and he had it all over Instagram. Now, he hasn't done that this year because obviously he's not an assistant coach and he's the head coach. But you're right. It's sort of the perception. If you're going to throw all those things out there and then 24 hours later you're on a flight to Fiji for a week with your family, you're probably better off not saying that. That's my only sort of criticism.
Yeah, I agree, mate. Like either not say it, or if you are going to say it, then don't do something so public. Like, I'm sure he could have got away with his family somewhere else that didn't involve being at an airport that's very public and leaving the country. It's very difficult to get away with that sort of thing if you're trying to do it on the quiet. So again, I think it's probably a little bit unfair to be criticising him. It's mainly because the journos are so hell bent on raking up some sort of garbage. But the reality is we're not performing again. We haven't performed for a long time. He's now in charge of us performing, and it's not a good look. So, and there'd be a lot of people who would understand what he's doing, and there'd be a lot of people who wouldn't be happy.
I 100% agree with what you said about Shane Richardson. That just seemed like a personal cheap shot from a bloke who really should be put out to pasture in Buzz Rothfield. And Andrew Webster, who obviously works for the rival paper, so there's always stuff going on there. But he sort of went on radio today and said, do people want to let the Tigers get back on their feet? This is the first year of a rebuild with the new coach and new CEO, or do they want to keep kicking them on the outside until they die? Because that's what it appears like to him. Any thoughts on that?
Look, it's a very public world, the world of NRL, and you're going to be open for criticism, everyone. And that's fair enough. If the criticism is genuine and professional and said the right way, then it's all good. But this personal vendetta stuff, like I used to get really cheesed off with Hooper because it was obvious he had a vendetta against Pascoe, and the way he spoke about him was unprofessional, it was cheap, it was personal, and I just thought it crossed the line. Now, I'd put Rothfield under the same category in this situation. Sometimes I can listen to Rothfield and think he makes a lot of sense, and he's actually often on 360, he's often the calming voice on that show, strangely enough. But he definitely has a vendetta against Richardson. That's I don't know where it stems from, but it's become personal, and he just has a go at him. And therefore, in my eyes and the eyes of many people, I'd reckon he just has no credibility whatsoever.
Obviously, most of the players you'd assume, I saw Barry O'Farrell, there was a few quotes from him saying it's mandatory for players to have at least 3 days off. And you'd think, Steve, during a long season where I think being mentally fresh as much as physically fresh is probably just, if not more important, is a good thing for players to get away for 5 or 6 days, as long as they're not going to the UK like John Bateman did last year. And, that I thought that was ridiculous because you're getting on 24-hour flights, you're going to be jet lagged. They came back and they got whacked 74-0 by the Cowboys, but I saw he's in Port Stephens. So I think good idea for players to get away from it for a few days, as long as you're not travelling the other side of the world.
Yeah, 100%. And like we've been smashed from all fronts this year, not the least being injury. So I'm sure their bodies would appreciate some time off, training as well as a game, obviously, to recover a little bit and to freshen up the mind, to get away, sit on a beach somewhere, sit in a pub, relax, take your mind off footy. It's not a bad thing, but I agree with you, mate. Like last year, Bateman didn't play a decent game after he got back, so you got to be smart with the way you go about it, I suppose.
Before we get into the player ratings, Steve, just one word to describe this season. It's hurtful, really, because I looked at this time sort of last year under Tim Sheens, where we were really considered a basket case, but we actually had 3 wins, which is one more win than we have at this time of the season in 2024. We had 3 wins and 8 losses. Admittedly, we lost our first 7 and some of them by big margins, but we then went on to win 3 of our next 4. This year, sitting at 2 wins in 16th place, both South and the Gold Coast won on the weekend. So it's looking pretty grim in that respect. But what's your one-word takeaway for the first 11 weeks of 2024?
All right, well, I'm going to be a little bit controversial, which is what you were hoping I'd be the other night, right? But I was too laid back. My word is underachieving. And I'm going to say I believe our roster is underachieving. And it's controversial between you and I, because I know you're really strong on the point that we have the poorest roster in the league and they're trying their guts out and doing their best, right? And I'm going to challenge that and say I don't agree with that, which is why at the beginning of the season I said this squad can make the 8. Right? I think there's enough good players in there to make the 8 if certain things fell our way. Injury-wise, it hasn't. You can't help that. We've had a lot of suspensions. You can't help that either to a point. I think some of those suspensions are self-inflicted, right? But if you just go through like a starting 17, perhaps from the beginning of the year, and you look at the quality of the squad, you got Buller, who at the beginning of the season up and coming fullback and was like the world was at his feet. Staines is a semi-experienced first-grade winger. You got Olam and Naden, very experienced centre pairing, dynamic on their day, strong centre pairing. Tupu, who seemed to be on the way up. Galvin, we didn't know anything about. I probably wouldn't have put him in there at the end of the season. Caesar coming back, experienced first grader. A question mark over coming back, but still someone who should be able to steer the ship round. Stefano should be about to have the season of his life. Clemmer, experienced front rower. Appy, best hooker in the game. Papali'i and Bateman, two of the strongest second rowers out there, apparently. Pole, question mark, right? He's actually come on. Then you put Fainu on the bench, and it was how he's played this year. You look at that squad, and you think that squad is capable of winning football games. Now, it has been decimated, and you can't help that. But if you look at that squad, I'm going to stick with the fact that we are underachieving to what we should be able to achieve.
Okay. I'd probably agree with part of that. I think some senior players are underperforming, and that's probably one of the reasons why we've lost 8 in a row. I just couldn't get past frustrating because it's just frustrating in so many levels. The fact we've been more competitive this year, but we have less wins. The fact that some senior players we thought were going to kick on have either stagnated or gone backwards. Just several things. The fact that we do things in games to cause self-harm. I would have said this time, last year or the year before, I probably would have said inept or hopeless because that's what we were. And I don't think we are that this year, but it's still very, very frustrating if you're a dyed-on-the-wall fan like we are that want to win games and you're in no better a position, if not worse. So
I actually reckon, mate, that word frustrating, that's better than mine. That's spot on because and the fact that we're not hopeless makes it even more frustrating. Like you in almost every game. Like I don't know, maybe it is every game. But if it's not every game, it's almost every game. There's a point in that match where you think we can do this. We're in the even probably the Brisbane game. We probably outplayed them in the first half, and you walk off. You're going to be 10-0 down, and they score a try with 5 seconds before the break from 60 metres. Like it's just. It's very, very frustrating. Let's go to the individual scores, Steve, and you can attach a word to it if you want as well, since we're big on the one word in this podcast. Let's start with the fullback, Dream Buller. All right, well, I've given him a 5 out of 10. I think he's played okay, but he certainly hasn't set the world on fire. But I'm going to defend him. My word for him is young. He's young, he's inexperienced, he's still learning his craft. That is becoming a bit of a cliche, I have to admit, but he is. But disappointing to what we thought, but maybe where we were expecting too much.
Boon on the podcast forum, Steve, he had some pretty strong comments after the last podcast. He said, "I'm here to defend Buller from the ridiculous claims on this podcast that seem to be a weekly attack." I'd probably take the blame for that. He says kick return, these are the stats that he came up with. Kick return meters, 6th best in the comp. Run meters, 5th best. Player in support, 4th best. Line engage, 44th in the comp, but 2nd best in fullbacks. Tackle breaks, 33rd in comp, 6th best for fullbacks. Line break assists, 39 in the comp and 7th best for fullback. Errors, 9th worst fullback with 11, but better than Walsh, Turbo and Drinkwater, who got more errors. 4 tries, which is the 11th best, and a better tackle percentage than either Walsh or Edwards. So he put the stats down there. And like I said on the podcast last week, my stats were obviously going to back up my argument. His stats back up his argument. But what does the eye test tell you, Steve? I just think the word I had for Buller was sluggish because I look at him and I look at other fullbacks and maybe it's a victim of the team he's playing in or maybe it's the style of player he is, but I would like to see him have more urgency in his game. I originally wrote urgency, but I would have to put lack of in front of it. And maybe that's just a bit subjective because of the way he runs, but I just think he's playing a bit sluggishly in attack this year, and that's been our main issue, attack.
Yeah, it has, and I agree with you. I think he gets lost in games, and I think he's not sure when to inject himself. I think it is definitely part of playing in a team. Like if he was going to come around the back when we're running shape, well, we haven't been running good shape all year, right? And so as he's coming around the back to inject himself, into a backline move or at the end of a backline move or a 3-pass, 3-wide move, he's already been run out of space, or he ends up running himself out of space because he goes in the same direction as the rest of the movement's been going. So we haven't got that right. We talk about him, and Gary talks about it a lot. Talk about him, trying to go up the middle. It's I think he has to learn how to sniff around the middle. It's very difficult because Appy will just shoot out, off the cuff, and if Buller's not prepared for that, well, it's gone, right? He can't be there for support because the moment has passed. But maybe there needs to be some more in their training around getting him going through the middle, supporting, the big boppers as they do hit it up, or being ready to trail Appy, because Appy's the one who makes the most yardage up, right through the ruck. But if you look at what I just said, then it's all about learning and training and coaching, and he's young, and he needs more and more of that.
I gave him the same mark, Steve. I went with 5. Would you lock him in for fullback for the rest of the year and just say, Jahream, you've got to pick it up, or you've got to keep learning, or do you think it's worth trying things for the rest of the year?
No, I'd lock him in. I don't know that there's anyone there really that's going to push him out. I'd like to lock him in at the beginning of next year too, but I don't think we're at a point where we're saying he's locked in for the next 3 or 4 seasons at fullback with us. He needs to keep improving. I'm hoping, I don't want to see us start the season with him getting pushed out and Taruva going into fullback, for example, because I'd much rather see Buller at his best at fullback, allowing Taruva to be at his best on the wing. I think we're stronger that way.
Justin Olam, Steve, a mark and a word for his season so far.
Yeah, I've given him 7. From when he's played, I think he's been a high performer in the team, and my word for him is impactful. Whatever he does, whether it's defence or whether it's a run, he has impact on the game, but I reckon he also impacts the players around him.
Yeah, I didn't have a very flashy word. I just went with strong because I think he has been strong. I actually gave him a 7.5 out of 10, and me and Gary were probably the ones that were most worried about his signing, both the injury and the lack of form last year at Melbourne, missing tackles and getting dropped to reserve grade. But I think he's been one of our better senior players so far. Charlie Stain, Steve?
Yeah, well, I've given him 3. I've been really disappointed with his season. The word I've used for him is slight, which is just his build, right? And he just finds it incredibly difficult in the modern game to be impactful from the wing at the start of sets, and that's what you need. Like he would get driven backwards at the point of contact 3 out of 5 times, and I reckon that's maybe being conservative. We're just on the back foot for the whole set after that. So, there's a good footballer in him. That he's fast, he's elusive, but in this modern game, when you just need to start your set so strongly and defences are up in your face so quickly, he's just not the man for the job, unfortunately.
Probably wouldn't be as big an issue, Steve, if you're in a Roosters backline or a Broncos or Penrith where they've got 2 or 3 real meter eaters, and he'd be that winger on the end of open space. But you're right, he's having to do that work in the backfield for us, and it's just very ineffective. That was the word I came up with, just ineffective. And I gave him a 5 because I think he's often a victim of the team he's in, doesn't get a lot of good ball, a lot of opportunities, but I just don't know where his future is in this back line, Steve. If you're going to have potentially Buller as a fullback, another undersized winger, we don't know who the other winger is going to be. Well, Taruva's probably the opposite of that. He is undersized, but he's just rock granite fit and muscly. He got 200 metres on the weekend. So is there a world where maybe Staines could fit in next year with Taruva, or do you think it's time to look for other pastures for Charlie Staines?
Look, I would hazard a guess that he's one of the guys being shopped around. I think them like if we were to pick up a really gun like I think Olam's a lock in. If we were to be able to pick up another really gun centre that is a good meter eater, as you said, then maybe. But then it's still in the back five. You've still got Buller and Staines trying to bring the ball back, and that's 2 out of your 5 that are both built fairly slight. You know, they have slight builds and still going to struggle. So, no, I reckon it's probably we're looking for someone else.
Lockie Galvin, Steve, like you said, this time last year, no one's ever heard of him except for Declan, who follows the lower grades. If you're a trooper and you follow the juniors and the lower grades, but you'll rank for him.
I've given him an 8. He probably hasn't played at an 8, like from an NRL perspective, every single game, but the impact he's had and just the way he's hit the ground running, that to me is an 8. And my word for him is hope. Like he's our great hope. You know, like got to lock him down for a long. I don't know. Do you know how long he's contracted for?
I think the end of 26, but you know that sounds like a long time, but it's not really, Steve, is it? Because the way contracts work these days, by the end of next year, he'll be able to negotiate a big deal. And I don't,
he could be signed for someone else. That's right. So
yeah,
I reckon they got to lock him down because he's the future of this club. That fella.
I gave him a 9 because I think he's a star, and I think he has performed like a star. Had a couple of maybe quiet games before last week, but everything about just his intangibles, Steve, his personality. He wants the ball. I've never seen probably a body language like his. Probably going back to Mitchell Moses, that's who he reminds me of. Obviously, we don't like Mitchell Moses now, but that personality I could see when he came into first grade. He wanted the ball. He wanted to win games. He wasn't afraid if you were behind on the scoreboard. He wasn't afraid to make a mistake. And I think that is a good trait to have. And I hope that partnership next year, it's definitely going to be Luai and Galvin, Steve.
Yeah, well, so I'll ask you something about that. So you think, like, you just mentioned Moses, right? And for years and years, we played those two, Moses and Brooks, the wrong way around, right? We made Moses the 5'8" and tried to get Brooks to be the organising half. We should have done it the other way around, because that's the way it's turned out. Do you reckon there's any thought to Galvin moving to 7 and Luai being the 6? So Galvin becomes your organising half, Luai more traditional individual running, play off the cuff 6.
A couple of weeks ago, I might have thought that would be something that might be in the back of their mind, but I really think that's not going to happen, because I think the reason Luai signed on is Benji said, mate, you are going to be given the keys to this team. And I was pretty worried watching him play the first 10 or 11 weeks, but then I've watched the last 2 weeks at halfback, and there's been a few different theories floating around about how Penrith asked him to play, because I was getting mighty frustrated like you when every time he was playing 6 this year, he'd just step off his left foot infield, and his outside backs weren't seeing any quality ball. But I was listening to someone during the week who says they got a theory that he's told to do that by Ivan Cleary, and that's to set up a sweep play for Dylan Edwards, who plays predominantly down the right-hand side. And then you've seen the last 2 weeks when he's been all over the field and he's been able to roam. I think he's been a little bit more direct. He's definitely been more impactful, his game. So it's given me some hope, Steve, that can work. And I'm 99% sure that Luai will be wearing the 7 next year.
Yeah, like I am too. I think what you said's right. I think he will, but I just wonder if that may be a better fit, because I've been watching him too, closely as well, and I'll still maintain, like he's last 2 weeks he's played good football, absolutely good football, but I still maintain that he plays.
It's still a bit off the cuff, isn't it?
It's off the cuff, and it's for himself, right? And I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but he's created an opportunity for himself. He still doesn't steer a team around the paddock, and even this last couple of weeks he often in a set of six wouldn't get the ball to the fifth tackle. If they were coming out of their end, like Yo was leading that team down the paddock, and then Luai would get the ball on the fifth tackle. And to his credit, he put in a great kick. He didn't really become involved in the attack until they were in the attacking zone, and he was able to do his thing. So I'm still not convinced he's going to be that guy, but he's still a good footballer.
Was interesting to listen to Yo after the game, and they don't give much away, Penrith, but one of the journos asked him, is there a big difference there with Luai at 7 compared to Cleary? And he said yes. Like, he was pretty adamant. He said, yes, I've got to do more talking. Jerome's a little bit more off the cuff. So I do think that's a fair point, that he's almost like the controller of that team still. And that's probably a question. That's a big question mark in our team. We certainly don't have a lock that is like a controller of our team.
No. And, I know I shouldn't argue with Gary while he's not here. You should give him the right to defend, but he talks about Appy being our controller, and that's true to a point, that your hooker can be a control, but your hooker doesn't run the team around the paddock, right? It doesn't, and Appy can't do that from 9. We need our 7 to do that. So, yeah, he's going to have to do it, or that's what might happen.
Jayden Sullivan, Steve, I'm not expecting an overly pleasant word here.
Look, I didn't realise how young he was until a week or so ago. So, I mean, he's only 22 or so. I didn't realise that. I've given him a 4 because he hasn't. Well, early in the season, he was dreadful. Last couple of games, he was okay. And my word for him is overrated, but there's a caveat to it, or a caveat to it, as you say. He's been overrated by the people that bought him here, is what I'm saying, right? Which has probably put him in a position that's, he's not good enough to be a leader in the halves at the moment. I don't think. And that's stem attack and defence. Like, his defence at times has just been horrendous. But yeah, that's what I reckon.
Underwhelming. I just got stuck on that. I gave him a 3. I think he's tried hard, maybe too hard the last few weeks, but just doesn't look like he's up to it as a first grade number 7. And that's, I think, what he was bought for, to be a number 7. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's top of that list that Shane Richardson on overseas. Aidan Sezer, Steve?
I've given him a 7, and my word is steady. He's delivered fairly consistently. Hasn't starred. He's done a few good things, but it hasn't been out and that star. He's not overly dangerous out in the field, but he does get us around the paddock fairly well and fairly consistently. His kicking game is usually not too bad. So yeah, that's my thoughts on him.
Yeah, I gave him 6.5. I just put as advertised. I think he's been solid.
Yeah.
I think he's done what he expected. We know he's probably in his last year, but I still think, Steve, that we've regressed since he's been out of the side. And I think, despite the fact we're still not really scoring more or less points without him, I think it's better for someone like Lockie Galvin to be learning alongside him rather than having Jayden Sullivan next to him.
Absolutely. Yeah, Galvin will be better off with having Sezer when he's back in a week or so.
Happy Coruscant, captain, Steve.
My word is heart. He plays with heart. He's the heart of our team. He's the heart and soul of everything we do, and I've given him a 9 out of 10. He's not perfect. No one is, but his effort is pretty close to perfect. That's for sure.
I went with load because I just think he's carrying too much of the load, Steve. He looks bloody exhausted after every game, and I feel a bit sorry for him because I think he's been the one sort of big name player that's come here and delivered and been even better than advertised as a player. I thought he probably deserved to still be in the Origin team. He's obviously been brushed by Madge, but I would like to see in the second half of the season a little bit more of the load shared around, Steve. Obviously, the boy Benji doesn't think Talon De Silva's ready because he hasn't really been in first grade or on the scene at all this year. But Jake Simpkin, to me, is a solid player. I think he's. I just find it bizarre that he plays on the bench and gets 6 or 7 minutes some games.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say, mate. I'd put what you're saying about Appy down to bench management, and it's probably the weakest part of Benji's coaching from my observations. Is he doesn't seem to use that bench well. We've multiple times had a player sitting on the bench, whether it's Simpkin or someone else that's only played minor minutes, if they've got on at all. And yeah, like our 14 should be going on for 20 minutes, I'd reckon, to give Appy that break at some stage. And the season's pretty much done and dusted. So let's preserve him for next year.
Stefano Utakamanu, Steve?
Yeah, 6 and inconsistent. There's moments where you watch him and you just think he's going to be the best prop in the game, but it's just too few and far between. And he's young as well. It's a common excuse for our team, and he's still learning. But he's got to play with more consistency. He doesn't deserve to be in State of Origin. That's for sure.
Well, we're on the same page there, Steve. That's exactly what I had written down. 6 and inconsistent. The Tigers are in a tough spot with him, aren't they? Because, there's senior forwards that are either being shopped around or not performing. And if we lose him, what else have we got? So they're probably going to have to overpay him. Maybe this last 6 weeks, maybe the market for him is not, the market's not going north, if you know what I mean. Maybe we might be able to stabilise his price, but I certainly think they're in a bit of a catch-22 there. Yeah,
they are, but it may be taken out of their hands too, because he is a player with a lot of potential, and he's got to see that it's worth staying here, right? He's got to see that the players around him and the coaching that he gets and the club in general is going to bring out the best in him. And we are horrendous. We have a horrendous record of bringing out the best in anyone, right? From the playing roster. I just hope, we will have to play overs, and I hope we're prepared to do it because we need him. But I just hope he's prepared to stay and doesn't get lured away, to the bright lights of one of the glory clubs,
John Bateman, Steve, our last player we're reviewing tonight.
I've given him 4. He's our vice captain, and my word is reckless. And he's like he can play really aggressively and really, and we need that. But he just goes over the top, and he's reckless. And some of the ridiculous passes and the mistakes,
penalties,
the penalties, the ill discipline. Yeah, it's for a vice captain, a bloke of his experience, it's not.
Yeah,
he's top of my list.
To sell to the UK.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that because?
I think he's done, mate. I think he's
done. Well, I had a bit of a word. Your word's better, reckless. I just had dinosaur. I couldn't think of a better word. I just think the rules of the game of the NRL's passing by a little bit, but I still worry, Steve, that as much as we haven't been thrilled with Papali'i and Bateman, if we get rid of both of them, we need to replace them, and we need to replace them straight away because I know we're not winning games, but they do keep us in games. I know that's not a huge thing, but you take 2 senior first graders out. They are first graders as much as what we think of them. They're probably not delivering, or definitely not delivering on their price tag. But I don't think we can afford to have both of them leave unless there's 2 replacements.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's easy when you're just doing it like we're doing it in isolation, one player and after another, and you go, you gotta go. But you're right, like Papali'i's gone, and Steve Roach made a really good point tonight.
That's rare.
Yeah, it's true. But he made a good point. Like he said, he was underperforming. He was complaining he wasn't getting enough ball. They moved him into lock. He was the best player on the field for that period of time, which he was until he got injured, and then next week he's out the door. Like it's just like that's why I keep talking about this squad underachieving. We've got good players there. We're just not able to bring out the best in them. Bateman has underachieved. Papali'i is underachieved. Now, is that them or is that us or is it both? I'd reckon it's both.
The coach, Steve, Benji Marshall, saved him till last before he give out our awards. I'm giving him a 6, and that's maybe people think that's a bit generous because we've only won 2 games. But I've just been impressed with certain aspects of. I think his selection's been good. I think he has held players accountable. I know there hasn't been a heap of changes, but there's not a heap to work with there underneath. And I think he has, dropped players if they've been underperforming. And I think he's maintained a pretty level head, which wouldn't be easy to do in your first year when you've lost 8 games in a row. We only see the press conference and that, but you can read stuff into that. And I've seen guys like Trent Barrett and even Demetrio look completely rattled when they've lost 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row. And I don't think he has looked rattled, and that's impressed me. But at the end of the day, he has only won 2 games.
Yeah, I've given him a 6. My word, it's probably not right. We've already talked about it. My word was stubborn because I think he's been stubborn in this last week in going away. But we already talked about that. So if I was to change that, I probably can't come up with a word. But I've actually been pleasantly surprised with, you know what the word is? Honesty.
Yep.
I like his honesty. I like his honesty with the press. I like his honesty with the fans. And it seems from the dialogue you hear that he's pretty honest with the players. And I think that's a really good trait to have as a leader, right? So, yeah, only a 6 because whilst there's been a lot of good stuff, we still haven't won many games. And at the end of the day, got to win.
I was pretty adamant in the preseason that, if you're giving Benji the reins, you've got to let him have the coaching staff he wants and not surround him with coaches that he doesn't want. And that was, obviously, he chose John Morris and Robbie Farah and Chris Hyington. But would Shane Richardson maybe be getting a little bit antsy? Is there reason to pivot from that? I just think I still think it's glaring, the lack of experience in that coaching staff. I did mention, I think you might have mentioned on Sunday night, Brad Arthur. That would be an interesting one because it wouldn't be easy for someone like Benji to have someone like that underneath who's been an NRL coach for 11 years and had a fair amount of success. But is that something at the moment you think is glaring, or you think something that's just going to have to be looked at throughout the rest of the year?
I think it'd be beneficial. If you go back to what you said about Richardson, would he be getting antsy? If he is, he'll make a change. That's obvious, and it won't be a question of Benji, are you happy with this? It'll be, no, we need to do this. He'll just do it, right? And he'll say, make it work, fellas. I think that's the way he'd operate. But in saying that, he has every word that's come out of his mouth around the coaching staff has been giving Benji what he needs, and Benji gets the final say. So I think no matter who he got, I think he'd make a call even if Benji wasn't happy. But once that call came, if it was Brad Arthur would know that Benji's the number one guy, and Brad Arthur would have to come here of the understanding that he's an assistant to Benji Marshall. If what Shane Richardson has said before rings true.
All right, Steve, let's give out our awards. We have 5 of them. 3 of them are positives. 2 of them are negatives. So there you go, Gary. He always calls me negative. I've got more positives than negatives in my awards. I could have gone the other way, Steve. You know that. Let's start with the negatives. Let's get them out of the way. Biggest disappointment this season, Steve. Which player have you gone for?
I've gone for I'm actually still deciding. I just realised I wrote 3 people down, then didn't cross 2 out.
Let me go first.
Yeah, you go first. You go first.
I'm going to go my biggest disappointment. And again, I'm like you. I haven't written it down, but I'm going to go with Jayden Sullivan. And that's just because probably the contract he got. It's probably not a surprise to me because I didn't overly rate him at St. George, but you give a guy a 4-year contract at rumoured 500, 600,000 a season, he really hasn't fired a shot. So there's other guys that are probably underwhelming, but maybe not as disappointing as Sullivan. So I'll go with him.
Well, I'm going to go with a different one. So this is the guy I'm most disappointed in, but he's not necessarily one of our lowest performers, right? If you get what I mean. So I'm going to go with Stefano. I'm actually disappointed with his season. He's still one of our better players, but he's not playing anywhere near what I thought he would produce this year. And so I found that quite disappointing.
Stuck in the mud, which was I interpreted my own award here, Steve, as in just stagnating, and I had Stefano and Buller, and that's the question mark. It's maybe unfair to put over them because we have, like you said, we have such a long history of players that look really good in their first year and then just either go backwards or stagnate or get stuck in the West Tigers rut. And they're two players that I don't think have progressed this year. Certainly Buller, I think he's gone a little bit backwards, which is maybe not a surprise for a second-year player where teams are doing more study on you. But Stefano, in his fourth year, those first 4 games were, 3 of them were brilliant, and then he's been really disappointing since. So I couldn't split both of them for the stuck in the mud award.
Well, I think you're right, mate. Like you know, you got to go and look at the evidence, and when the evidence is overwhelming, you start to form a conclusion based on that evidence, right? And the evidence is there that as a club, no matter who it is, who's coaching, who's in the playing group, who's running the show, we just don't bring the best out in our players. We just don't. And, we've got this great hope that that's changing. And under this new regime and under Richardson, he's going to pull us all in the right direction, and that'll change. But at the moment, culture is so poor that we just can't get these guys performing. And it's players around them, it's the coaching staff, it's the walls of the organisation. And until that changes, it's not going to. And it is what you said, mate. Catch-22 is so true, because then other players look at it and they say, I'm not going there. You know what? And managers look at it and say, I'm pulling this bloke out of this club, right? And I don't think it's like this year. This playing group seem united and they try their guts out, and the effort is there, and there is something good happening there. I'm not saying that, but they're still underperforming, and it's a chronic problem with our club.
Who's been the biggest surprise, Steve, in 2024?
Well, I'll give you my stuck in the mud first, mate, if that's all right.
I thought you just did.
No, that was a rant.
That was a rant, sorry. Who's stuck in the mud, Steve?
My stuck in the mud is Staines, right? And you can take it two ways, because when he's coming out of his end, it looks like, no, I won't go any further. So that's it. My surprise, I've got 2, mate. I can't split them. Galvin and Fainu, Samuel Fainu. I did, both just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I went with Samuela. I think he's been fantastic, and because all I heard in the preseason from not so much Declan, because he rated him, but definitely the journos was all about Latu Fainu, and I just thought his brothers were almost like the Shaquille Mitchell to Latrell Mitchell. We'll give you a contract so we can get your brother across, but he's been an absolutely outperformed his brother, and I love his attitude, Steve. He's a bit of a hothead, but he's, for the most part, he's controlled that. I just like the fact that I saw he got one game at Brisbane, he got benched and he wanted to fight someone in the crowd. I like that. And I didn't like when he got sin bin against Brisbane, but like that sort of contagious attitude for one of our young guys. He just looks like he loves the contest, and he's not afraid to go out there and sledge blokes and mix it up. But I think, unlike someone like Bateman, he sort of, for the most part, he's managed that aggression. Bateman's given away way more silly penalties than Fainu. So I think he's been a big, pleasant surprise.
But there's the big acid test, mate, isn't it? Like we talk about the culture and Richardson pulling us in the right direction. So all of a sudden we've got Samuel Fainu, we've got Pole, we've got Steph, we've got Appy. There's a pretty good forward pack forming there if we can bring the best out of these guys.
Most improved, Steve. I wanted to find a better word for this, because it was, I don't know if it was the case when you were, playing under 12 soccer or whatever you played when you were young, but if you won the most improved, it often means like you were the worst player that had you improved just a little bit. So maybe I could call it rising star or something, but I'll stick with most improved for now. Is there someone who's improved on what they did in 23?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? So when I thought about this, I thought, well, that player's got to have played for us last year and played first grade last year. So I've gone with Polo. I thought he was pretty inconsistent last year and fairly ineffectual in a lot of games. But he's been much better this year, I thought.
Yep, that's a good one. I was going to go with Seyfarth just to antagonise Gary, but he's not on tonight. So I'm going to leave that one blank. Best player this season, Steve. I mean, last year, I think Jareen Buller won it last year, which surprised me a bit. And before the haters say I'm hating on him again, I was just surprised that Appy didn't win everything last year. But if the season ended tomorrow, Steve, and COVID came back and there was no more NRL, who would win our Player of the Year?
Heart and soul of the team, Happy Coruscant. Yeah, should be playing next Wednesday. Best player by a mile.
I can't argue with that. I put Lockie Galvin, but I can't argue with Happy Coruscant. All right, Steve, we're going to do the quiz in a minute, your favourite time of the week, but I'm going to have to open it first. Do you have any
My internet's
on Origin, or are you like me, you really couldn't care less about Origin?
Look, I'll watch it and I enjoy
it.
I enjoy watching good footy, but, the fact that, 2 months of the season or even longer, it's 3 months, isn't it? The season gets
compromised.
Yeah, it gets blown apart. Doesn't. It's an interesting team, right? But I actually I don't throw much up in the forum these days. But I did put this comment up that it sort of that team that was selected for New South Wales just shows me that Madge has only got one style in his kit. It's just got he cannot change it. It's just tough, rough and tough, up the middle, 5 up and kick, and that's what we're going to see next Wednesday, I think.
Okay, well, he'll be a genius if he wins, but I think, I wouldn't back him. But I mean, he couldn't be any worse than the last coach, Steve. So we'll see.
What do you think of the team?
My mate had a good word for it. I thought he described it as a half and half pizza. I don't know if you've ever ordered a half and half pizza, Steve, from Domino's or something, where you can opt to get half a pepperoni and half a whatever.
No, I just get 2.
Yeah. But he said, I can understand if he's going down that path of picking the hardest workers and stuff. And I think Cam McGuinness and those guys deserve to be there. But I didn't understand picking Zach Lomax and Sualihi or whatever his name is. Like, if a guy's going to rugby next year, and Zach Lomax for me is a selfish player. I know he's a brilliant player at times, but I just thought those 2 selections were a little bit bizarre. I also found it bizarre, although I'm sure they'll change it. They don't have Matt Burton on the bench, so if they get an injury in the backs or in the halves, their backup halfback in that 17 is Cam McInnes, which is a very, who can forget last year, Damien Cook playing at centre after 2 minutes. That was great. So
like Burton's 18th, isn't he? I think.
Yeah, I think I'll switch that. All right, quiz time, Steve. Multiple choice, so you're always a chance with these ones. Having played the Eels in round 1 of 2005, that was a loss. I was at that game. Who did we play in round 2, 2005? Was it A, the Bye, B, Canterbury, C, the Roosters, or D, the Warriors?
C, the Roosters.
No, it was the Bye. It was round 2, the Bye, and I can see Yachty's actually gone in order here because we actually, I don't know if you remember that game, Steve, that the next 2 weeks we beat both the grand finals, 2004. We beat Canterbury 37-36. Scott Prince field goal at the end, and then we beat the Roosters the week after. Question number 2, is it true or false? The 100th West Tigers player debuted during our 2005 season. Is that true or false?
True.
No, it's false.
50%, and I still couldn't get it.
The great Rocky Tremaci.
Yachty, you and I are having a chat.
The great Rocky Tremaci was our 100th player, scored a try on debut at Campbelltown in a victory over the Sharks. Question 3. How many points did Brett Hodgson score in 2005? Now, he scored a truckload, I'll give you that. I reckon he must have won leading point scorer with this amount. How many points, Steve? Obviously, a goal kicker and he tries.
Yeah, I reckon 350.
Pretty good guess. 308. 15 tries and 124 goals. I don't reckon any West Tigers players got over 200 the last 10, 15 years, but Yachty, you'll tell me if I'm right there.
Pound for pound, one of our best players ever.
Well, I mean, he was a genius, wasn't he, Steve? Like how to survive, he would have been what? It would have been 75 kilos at best.
Yeah.
And he was tough as nails, but you have to be a genius to survive at that weight, don't you? Question 4. Which 3 past or present Australian Rugby League clubs won a premiership in their first finals series campaign? So the first time they made the finals, they won a comp.
Why don't you ever go at this one, man?
Well, I've got the answers in front of me, so that's.
I know that's.
But I can tell you, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners can tell you that
it's us.
One of them was us. So there you go. And one of them, Steve, was back in the, when they used that square ball in 1908 when they had the 8 teams. So who won in 1908, Steve?
Was it Glebe? Did Glebe win the first comp?
They were definitely playing Glebe, but it was South, the one that 1908. And in 1910, it was a 4-all draw, Steve, so that would have been an absolute thriller. I'm not sure if you saw that game. Joel might have seen it.
Yeah, I was just watching it on Fox.
4-all draw. Yes, 4-all draw, but the Jets were awarded
the game. Yachty, do better, Yachty.
They were awarded the game, the Jets, because they were minor premiers. So there you go. Last question is a who am I? Yachty's even throwing in a bit of humour these days in these quizzes. I'm just reading now. Who am I? I played in Australia and England. I'm currently at the Parramatta Eels. You'd be on the coaching staff. I began my coaching career in 2003. I briefly coached 2 NRL teams, so he was an interim coach. One of them was, nope. It's an ex-West Tigers player. I was an assistant with the West Tigers in Tim Sheen's last year as head coach during his first tenure. I had the same cultural background as a 2005 grand finalist. I'm sure he's Greek. I'll give that away. I'm the only West Tigers player who was born in the 1960s. And he got hint, I am not a student of other 1960s school teacher Joel Helms. He was not a student of Joel Helms, who was obviously teaching in the 60s. Yes, Steve, you're correct. It is Steve Georgalis. Played 20 games for the West Tigers, scoring 1 try. All right, Steve, that's it for tonight. We've done well. We haven't jetted off to the Caribbean like Joel, and we haven't pulled up sick like Gary. We've got through the yards, and I don't even know if Declan still supports the Tigers. I haven't heard from him.
Declan's off whinging the fact that he can't buy a house because he's too young or something.
I'll leave that problem with him. All right, mate. Well, Sunday night, I think we're hoping, no guarantee, but we are hoping to get a couple of fans on to do something similar, talk about their thoughts on the season. If you're interested, if you're on the West Tigers podcast forum, if you're interested in coming on and having your say on a bit of a mid-season review, let us know. But Joel will be back Sunday to host these. So thanks for joining me tonight, and I'll see you soon.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.